Shalom Aleichem, meine liebe Freund. Ich heiße Mottel Dittner und das ist 15 Minuten Yiddish. Mehr weniger. Jede Woche bringen wir euch eine Mini-Lektie in Jiddisch Sprach und Kultur von dem nationalen Jiddisch-Theater Volksbühne. Welcome back to 15-Minute Yiddish. If you missed any of our past episodes, die genisht. Don't worry, you can view them all online at nytf.org. Today, we're going to town. Let's start by taking a look at some vocabulary related to ways that we can get around. The street is die Gasse, plural, die Gassen. If we're talking about a narrow lane, that would be das Gessel, plural, die Gesslach. A sidewalk is der Trottoir. That comes from French, plural, die Trottoiren. A car is der Auto, plural, die Autos. A truck is der Masseauto, plural, die Masseautos. A bus is der Autobus, plural, die Autobussen. If you happen to come from a city that has a tram or a trolley or a streetcar, we have two words for that. Der Tramway, or die Tramwayen in the plural. And we also have der Trolleybus, singular, die Trolleybussen in the plural. There's also two words for a bicycle. Der Velociped, plural, die Velocipeden. You may also hear a bicycle referred to as der Rover in the singular, die Roveren in the plural. This comes from the name of a very specific model of bicycle that was popular in the 1880s, and the brand name just stuck. It's sort of like referring to any tissue as a Kleenex. A train is die Bahn, plural, die Bahnen, and a subway is die Unterbahn, plural, die Unterbahnen. But specifically in New York City, you'll more commonly hear it referred to as der Subway, plural, die Subways. A train car is der Waggon, plural, die Waggonen, not to be confused with der Wagen, plural, die Wagens, which is a cart usually drawn by a horse. And speaking of horses, not many of us get around by horse these days.
Speak for yourself, partner.
Fair enough. A horse is das Pferd, plural, die Pferd.
How about a camel?
Okay. Der Camel, plural, die Kämmelin.
Ooh, how about an elephant? I once rode an elephant at the zoo.
Let's talk about animals in another episode.
Aww.
Thank you for understanding. I think that does it for our means of conveyance, so that means it must be verb time! There are several verbs to describe ways to get around. We saw a few of these last season. Spazieren is to take a walk, for pleasure. Laufen is to run. Today let's start by looking at gehen. This is a slightly irregular verb. It means to go by foot or to walk. Let's take a look. Ich gehe. Du gehst. Sie, es geht. Wir gehen. Notice the insertion of the e or the ion before the final n or nun, which does not exist in the infinitive form. Ihr geht. Sie gehen. Alle zusammen. Ich gehe. Du gehst. Sie, es geht. Wir gehen. Ihr geht. Sie gehen. The verb to travel by transportation is fahren. This is a regular verb. Let's take a look. Ich vor. Du forst. Sie es fort. Mir vorn. Ihr fort. Sie vorn. Alle zusammen. Ich vor. Du forst. Sie es fort. Mir vorn. Ihr fort. Sie vorn. Ausgezeichnet. Now, if we're talking about riding a horse,
or a camel,
Or an elephant?
yes, riding any animal would be reiten. This is a regular verb, and since we have a lot of material to get to, I'm going to trust that you can conjugate that one on your own. Let's focus for a moment on forming the past tense of the two verbs that we've already looked at. If you remember back to season 1, the past tense is formed with a helper verb, usually haben, but sometimes sein, and the prefix of ge or gimel ayin. When we're talking about verbs describing motion, the helper verb is always sein. Let's take a look at gain first. This is an irregular past tense verb because instead of taking the ge prefix and adding it to the infinitive form of the verb, we see a change in the form. Gegangen. Let's take a look. Ich bin gegangen. Du bist gegangen. Sie, es ist gegangen. Wir seien gegangen. Ihr seid gegangen. Sie seien gegangen. Fahren uses a regular past tense conjugation. Ich bin gefahren. Du bist gefahren. Sie, es ist gefahren. Wir seien gefahren. Ihr seid gefahren. Sie seien gefahren. Now that we're out and about, let's talk about places we can go. Die Krom is the store, plural die Kromen. If you think back to season 1 when we talked about occupations, remember a Kremer is a storekeeper. Now if we want to go to a specific type of store, we simply add the word describing what they sell. Die Speiskrom is a grocery store. Die Bücherkrom is a bookstore. If we want to grab a bite to eat, we can go to der Restaurant, plural die Restauranten. And if we want to make a l'chaim, we can go to die Kretschme, plural die Kretschmes, or to die Schenk, plural die Schenken. Also, when we discussed occupations, you might remember a Kretschmer or a Schenker is a barkeeper. If we want to take a stroll, we can go to der Park, or plural die Parken. If we want to read, we can go to die Bibliothek, plural die Bibliotheken. If we want to catch a movie, we can go to der Kino, plural die Kinos. Or we can catch a live performance at der Theater, plural die Theaters. When it comes to learning, we can go to die Schule, which means school, but it also means synagogue, plural die Schulen. Der Cheder is a religious lower school, plural die Chdorim. A religious upper school is die Yeshiva, plural die Yeshivas. A church is die Kirche, plural die Kirchen, also known as der Kloister, plural die Kloisters. If we're going to work, we would refer to that generically as die Arbeit. A business is das Geschäft in the singular, die Geschäften in the plural.
My mother used to say, nicht dein Geschäft. That means none ya.
None ya?
Yeah, none your business.
Ah, gotcha. If you're going to an office, that's der Büro, plural die Büroen. There are plenty more things to see and do when you go out, but I think you've got a lot of verbs and vocabulary to take in for today. Now we need to broach a rather difficult grammatical issue, which we will revisit often over the next several episodes. It has to do with prepositions. Professor, seid ihr so gut? Remind us what prepositions are.
Gladly. A preposition is a word governing and usually preceding a noun or pronoun and expressing a relation to another word or element in the clause. Examples are the words in, on, around, before, to, concerning, etc.
Schönen Dank, Professor. To describe going to a place, we would say zu if we are talking about the exterior of the location. If we're going to the interior, we would say in. Sometimes this is the same as in English. For example, in English I would say, I am taking a walk in Central Park. In Yiddish, ich spazier in Central Park. But in English we say, I'm going to school, and in Yiddish we would say, ich gehe in Schule. Now, there's a third preposition that's used to describe arriving in a city, for example, by means of transportation. Kein. Now, I know you've seen this word before when going negative when paired with nicht kein. But in this case, it's a homophone and it means to. Ich for kein Brooklyn. Here's where things start to get tricky. In English, our pronouns change when they are the object of a preposition. I have an apple. Give an apple to me. This is true in Yiddish as well, and we already saw this last season. Ich hab an Apple. Gib an Apple zu mir. But unlike in English, in Yiddish we also have to change some of our articles when the noun is the object of a preposition. Let's do a quick Iberchazer review of our articles. The Yiddish indefinite articles are a and an, the same as they are in English. The Yiddish article for masculine singular nouns is der. For neutral singular nouns, it's das. And for feminine singular nouns, it's die. Die is also the plural article for all nouns regardless of gender. And we use these when the noun is the subject of the sentence. Now let's take a look at what happens when a noun becomes the object of a preposition. The good news is a and an stay the same. But der turns into dem, dos also turns into dem, the singular die becomes der, and the plural die stays the same. Let's look at an example involving der Park. If we want to be vague, we can say, Die Frau spaziert in a Park. Doesn't matter which park she's in. On the other hand, if we want to be very specific and use the name of the park, then we don't need an article at all. Die Frau spaziert in Central Park. But if we want to say, the woman walks in the park, that would be, Die Frau spaziert in dem Park. Here's an example with the neutral noun, das Pferd. Just a quick reminder, the Yiddish word for on is oif. Der Mann reit auf dem Pferd. And an example using a feminine noun, die Bahn. In Yiddish, we say that one rides with transportation. Sie fahren mit der Bahn. And a plural noun, die Trottoiren. Remember, no change. Sie gehen auf die Trottoiren. We're going to try this out, but to keep things as simple as possible, I'm going to leave this table here, and I will put the relevant noun on the screen together with its article. One last thing. When we're asking somebody where they're going, we say, wohin? Sophia, wohin geht der Mann? Der Mann geht in der Krom. Sehr gut. Wayne, mit was fahren die Menschen? Sie fahren mit die Autobahn. Double check your article.
Oh, sie fahren mit der und der Bahn.
Gerecht. Hinde, es ist 9 Uhr in der Früh. Wohin fahren die Menschen?
Sie fahren kein der Arbeit.
Close. You got the article right, but in this case, we wouldn't say cane.
Oh, I thought you said that we use cane when talking about transportation.
Yes, cane is used when going to a specific destination, like the name of a city. Sie fahren kein San Francisco. But something more generic like work would be zu.
Oh, sie fahren mit der Unterbahn zu der Arbeit.
Sehr gut. Scott.
Der Auto fährt auf dem Trottoir.
Nein, der Auto fährt auf der Gas.
Gerecht. Professor, wohin gehen die Menschen?
Die Menschen gehen in der Bibliothek.
Sehr gut. And Murray, wo davent men?
Men davent at the racetrack. Kidding, kidding. Men davent in der Schule.
Ausgezeichnet. Keep practicing this. It gets really tricky, and it's another good reason to memorize the gender of nouns. Well, that's our time for today. Join us next week when we take a trip to the doctor's office. Derweil, seid gesund.